Slavery existed in the American colonies from before the United States became a country until the end of the Civil War. There are many wrong ideas about slavery in general. Most Americans do not know that some black former slaves and free black men also owned black slaves. A few of them even became important in politics. Despite the strong racial bias that was present, some black slave owners got their slaves by inheriting them from their former masters who set them free in their wills. Others were born free or were freed by their owners and then bought slaves of their own. Some worked hard, earned money, bought their freedom first, and later purchased freedom for their families. Who were these black slave owners? How did they reach such a position in a society controlled mostly by white people? What made them different from other black people? What allowed them in some colonies and later states to be treated almost like white people in certain ways? What changes happened in colonial society that turned indentured servants into slaves for life? Who was Anthony Johnson? Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, a former soldier and Marine Corps Scout sniper, history professor, historian, and book author. We will answer these questions and other related topics in this part of Forgotten History. The great majority of African Americans in the United States were enslaved, and this was true in all states, not only in the South. Our first important person is Anthony Johnson. He was born in Angola and captured by Portuguese slave traders. They gave him the name Antonio. His captors then sold him into the Atlantic slave trade. He sailed to Virginia in 1621 on the ship James. The Virginia muster or census of 1624 lists his name as Antonio, a Negro, noted in the records as an indentured servant. Antonio, who later became Anthony, was bought by a colonist in Virginia, but was treated as an indentured servant, which was common at that time. He worked for a merchant with the Virginia Company. He became a Catholic. Johnson was sold as an indentured servant to a white planter named Bennett to work on his Virginia tobacco farm. At that point, he was not officially a slave because slave laws did not exist in Virginia until 1661. Before that date, Africans in the colony were not considered slaves by law. According to records from his owner and other documents, Anthony was almost killed during the Indian Massacre of 1622. On Good Friday, the Powhatan Indians attacked colonists in the Tidewater area of Virginia. They raided the settlement, including the Bennett farm where Antonio worked, and killed 52 out of 57 men there. Antonio fought back, was wounded, and gained respect from his master. In 1623, a black woman named Mary arrived on the ship Margaret and John. She came to work on the same plantation as Antonio, where she was the only woman. Antonio and Mary got married and stayed together for more than 40 years. Around 1635, Antonio and Mary finished their indentured service. Antonio changed his name to Anthony Johnson. He first appeared in legal records as a free man when he bought a calf in 1647. During this early time, free black people had a fair amount of equality with white people. About 20% of free blacks in Virginia owned their own homes and land. In 1662, the Virginia colony passed a law saying that children born in the colony took the social status of their mother. This meant children of enslaved women were born into slavery, even if their fathers were free, European, Christian, and white. This went against English common law, which said children took the status of their father. The Virginia colonial government said that since Africans were not Christians, common law did not apply to them, even if they converted, as Anthony Johnson did. On July 24, 1651, Johnson received 250 acres of land under the headright system. He got this by buying the contracts of 5 indentured servants, including his son Richard Johnson. Under the headright system, a person who brought indentured servants to the colonies received 50 acres for each servant. The land was located on the Great Nassawadox Creek, which flowed into the Pungateague River in Northampton County, Virginia. This is where Anthony Johnson ran his successful tobacco farm. One of his indentured servants was John Casaw, under the 1645 Virginia Taxation Act. All Negro men and women, and all other men aged 16 to 60, were considered taxable. After a fire in 1652 damaged his property badly, he asked the courts for help and received relief. At that time, people were taxed based on indentured servants, not on property. Later, slaves were taxed as property. It is not clear from records why the Johnson women were not taxed, but this change gave them the same social position as white women who were not taxed. Back then, people were judged more by their religion than by race or ethnicity. Until true legal slavery began, it was possible for people of different races to move up in society. In the court case, the judges noted that Anthony and Mary Johnson had lived in Virginia for over 30 years and were well respected in their community. A 1653 Northampton County Court document called Mary Anthony's Wife. By the 1650s, Anthony and Mary Johnson were farming 250 acres in Northampton County. Their two sons owned 550 acres. They also had other indentured people under contract, though the exact number is unknown. His son Richard Johnson also had his own indentured servants, probably received from his father. These were effectively slaves with a limited time, but if the contract ended, they had to be freed. In 1654, John Casor, who had been sentenced to lifetime indentured service in 1640 for running away from a previous owner, sued Johnson. He claimed his indentured time was over and he went to work for Robert and George Park. Johnson filed a freedom suit to get Casor back, but Parker won at first. What is surprising now is that Johnson, a black man, was allowed to file a petition in court and to testify and give evidence. This shows the fairly equal system that existed at that time. However, Johnson appealed to the Northampton County Court in Virginia. The court changed its decision and ordered Casor returned to Johnson in 1655. Parker had to pay Johnson compensation. Then Casor made history, as he was likely the first person declared a slave for life in Virginia. This means that his black owner, Anthony Johnson, was probably the very first slave owner in all the colonies, and he was a black man. There were both black and white indentured servants. Many whites, especially Irish, were also sentenced to lifetime service like blacks. Before Casor's case, the difference was that whites could usually buy their freedom in the end. So, Anthony Johnson was apparently not only the first African American whose right to own a slave for life was accepted in the colonies, he was therefore technically the first legal slave owner in the colonies, no matter if black or white, as decided by the Virginia court. Soon after, slavery became legal in all the colonies. Later, Johnson moved his family to Somerset County, Maryland. He leased at least 300 acres for tobacco farming for 99 years, which he named Tory's Vineyards. When Anthony Johnson died in 1670 that August, his plantation went to Robert Parker, not to Johnson's children. A jury ruled that Anthony's land in Virginia, which he had given to his sons, could be taken because he was a Negro and therefore an alien. As a result, the 50 acres Anthony gave to his son Richard ended up with his white neighbor George Parker. It did not matter that Richard, a free man, had lived on the land with his wife and children for 5 years. A judge ruled that Anthony Johnson was not a citizen of the colony because he was black, but even so, he could own his own slaves and keep his property for a while. Soon after Johnson's death came a system of legal slavery that was lifelong, passed down through families and based only on race. This system was set up in all the colonies by the early 1700s. Because of this, Johnson has been called historically the Black Patriarch of the first community of Negro property owners in America. He was the first black slave owner to be part of a court case that led to an indentured black man, John Casor, being legally decided as a slave for life, since hereditary slavery did not exist during his time of owning Casor and others he bought. It can be argued that Anthony Johnson was in fact the first real slave owner in the American colonies, and he was a black man. We hope you enjoyed this segment of Dark Slavery Stories. Please click like and subscribe for free. Stay tuned, be engaged and informed. Send us comments if you have questions or show ideas, and we will reply to all requests and comments as soon as we can. Thank you.